When trying to stimulate practice growth, there is a big mistake that we see a lot of doctors make, and that's what I want to talk to you about in this week's tip. So, explaining this problem takes a little bit of doing, so I'm going to start with a scenario. Let's say we have a dentist, and they're doing $90,000 a month, seeing 30 new patients per month. So they do the calculations, and they realize they're making about $40,000 off of the 30 new patients per month that they are seeing. That's the average. So $40,000 off those specific 30 new patients, so averaging about $1,300 per new patient. So the doctor wants to grow, and they do the math and determine that if they add an additional 30 new patients based on the numbers they already have, they should see an additional $40,000 bump in their collections, right? If they're already making 40 from the 30 that they're getting, they add 30 more, they should go from doing $90,000 a month and do an additional $40,000 to doing $130,000 a month. So they go through the motions and they spend the money to attract those 30 additional new patients per month, but yet they only see a marginal increase of $10,000. They go from $90,000 to $100,000. Well, what happened and why didn't they see the expected growth? Well, it's a variation of something called the law of diminishing returns, and that's what I want to get into in this week's tip. And more importantly, beyond going over this law, I want to talk about what you should do so that you don't fall victim to it and can actually expand consistently. All right, so what is the law of diminishing returns? Well, it's an economic law, which let's just define it. I think that's a good place to start, and I'll put it up on screen. I promise it's not boring. It says law of diminishing returns is an economic principle that states as an investment in a particular area increases, the rate of profit from that investment cannot continue to increase if other variables remain constant. In other words, the effectiveness of each additional unit of input decreases. The law of diminishing returns also states that in any production process, a point will be reached where adding one more production unit while keeping the others constant will cause the overall output to decrease. For example, if a factory employs workers to manufacture its products, at some point, the company will operate at an optimal level. Adding additional workers beyond this optimal level will result in less efficient operations. Okay, so now we just went through that. Now let's take a look at how that applies to this doctor example I just gave you. So this doctor was getting 30 new patients a month, making $40,000 a month from those new patients. So they thought, okay, I'll just add another 30 and I'll make an additional 40, right? Simple enough. But what they were looking at, we can call those new patients an input, right? Into the practice, an input. But at the same time that the doctor did that, the doctor did not change any of the variables associated with that input. And look, I'm not trying to get into new words or weird words, but let's just look at this because this is actually a good point. So if you see more new patients, what has to happen with that new patient when they come into practice? Well, we need to make sure that we have time to actually do a thorough exam on those patients. That's doctor time required. There's doctor time required if the doctor is going to diagnose and present treatment. That also requires treatment coordinator time, more treatment coordinator time. Okay? So, and then also if we're running our new patients through hygiene as an example, well, that requires more hygiene time at that point, okay? So maybe when they were getting 30 new patients a month, if a new patient called in and they were calling into, they're new to the area and they want to get a cleaning, they got on the schedule within, 3 days. But now that you've upped it to 60, since you haven't expanded any of your variable, like for example, hygiene time, well, now that new patient has to wait 1 to 2 weeks, which is a bad customer service point. And maybe when the doctor was getting 30 new patients a month, the doctor had, 20, 30 minutes to spend meeting a new patient and doing the exam and doing the charting and so on. And they had time in the schedule where they could actually sit down with this patient and present the treatment plan. Well, now that we've doubled the new patients, we haven't expanded the variable of doctor time, and the doctor doesn't have 20 minutes to do the exam and the charting and meeting the new patient. They have 10. Okay, and they don't have the same amount of time to present that treatment plan, and our treatment coordinator is running into the same problem. So we changed one thing, the number of new patients coming in and input into the practice, but we didn't change any of the variables surrounding how new patients were handled, all the different points with where new patients are handled. So when you're trying to expand, you have to think with the entire process. Let me give you a couple other examples with this because I want you to think with this because I've seen this a lot. Let's say You're building your hygiene area. It's something that we're large proponents of. We talk to our clients about it all the time, and I've talked to you about it via tips and also on our podcast, okay? So let's say you're an owner doctor and you're working 4 days a week and you have a hygienist for 4 days a week, right? Or let's say you have 6 days of hygiene a week, 1.5 hygienists. And you go, wow, I'm getting X amount of treatment plans out of my hygiene department, and I have all these inactive patients. We could probably fill up more hygiene time. So you do a big campaign in the office, and you go from 6 days of hygiene a week, 1.5 hygienists, to 12. So now you have 3 full-time hygienists for just you, the one owner doctor. So from a hygiene perspective, that's awesome. Your patients are being kept active in the practice. Your hygiene area becomes more and more productive. But let's look at the variable of the doctor's schedule for a second. Well, now what's happened to the doctor? The doctor, 3 times an hour in some cases, is having to glove and deglove to go do a recall exam, okay? The doctor loses a lot of time in their schedule. He or she doesn't have time to sell anymore the way that they used to before. They don't really have time to spend with patients anymore because they're constantly in and out of the hygiene ops. So you see the hygiene production goes like this, while the doctor production at the same time goes like that. So there we increased the input of hygiene patients, but we did not increase the variable of doctor time and availability. And if there's a lot of treatment in your patients of record that is incomplete, which most offices have, well, the doctor doesn't have time to effectively present it like they used to, and this also starts to tax the treatment coordinator's time because they don't have time to be able to actually, effectively present treatment with your patient base. Then to top it all off, you've probably spent more money on administrative staff to fill these hygiene ops, and you're spending more money for hygienists, but in a great practice, 30% of the production is going to come from hygiene. The majority of the production is going to come from the doctor's schedule. So you're spending all this extra money, but you don't see this huge production bump because the doctor's production has stayed constant or dropped, just the hygiene production has gone up, so your overhead goes up, just because you didn't increase the variable of doctor time and treatment coordinator time. And just if you want to walk away with, from that particular example with anything, one thing that we advise is you don't exceed a 1 to 1.5 ratio. This is in a general dental practice, 1 to 1.5 ratio between doctor and hygienist time, meaning 1 doctor for every 1.5 hygienists. When you start hitting 2, 2.5, 3, it starts to make the doctor's schedule inefficient. So this is just something to keep in mind. If you're going to go to 2, 3 hygienists, you probably need an associate doctor and you need to reorganize a little bit. I've gone through this myself personally. We're in the seminar business, right? So, seminar and training, not just the seminar business and coaching. But we're in the seminar business, and there'll be a point based on the amount. Let's say I go on the road and we do a seminar in, Chicago or Los Angeles or something like this. And I bring a team with me, and we go to do the seminar, and there's a certain sweet spot that you hit, as in this law of diminishing returns, the point where it says the company will operate at an optimal level. So I'll have a certain amount of staff, and let's say there's 30 attendees in the room. Every attendee can get the optimal level of attention at that point. It's good for them, and it's good for us as a company. I can sit down with somebody and really address what they have going on because I can make sure that everybody in the room is getting an adequate amount of attention with the team that I've brought. Well, let's say I double the number of people in the room, which at first glance would be super desirable, right? Oh, wow, this is great. I have twice as many people. 2 times is great, right? Well, but you hit a point where that becomes ineffective. So let's say I brought 6 people to handle the 30 people that are in the room. Well, now I have 60 people in the room. I can't handle everybody. So I need to bring 12 people. But let's say organizationally, I'm not at a point where I have 6 other people that are at the same skill level as the original 6. Well, now I start to see more inefficiencies and less effectiveness. So this is something that you want to keep an eye on. As you want to grow, you have to look at the entire process. So how do you handle something like this, right? Whether it's you want to expand the number of new patients that you have coming in or your hygiene department, which are the 2 primary vectors that you're going to use to expand any dental practice in the first place. What you have to do, as I was mentioning just a minute ago, is you have to walk back the whole production process and look at everything that goes along with it. Let's take an example of new patient calls. Let's say, again, I want more new patients. And in order to increase my number of new patients, I'm going to do an implant funnel. I'm going to do more Google. I'm going to do more, Facebook ads, whatever I'm going to do. Well, so by doing that, I'm going to increase more phone calls or forms. Well, that's going to require more employee time. Do I have adequate employee time and the skilled employees in order to actually handle those numbers of calls coming in? So I have to make sure these people are trained. Then on top of that, because if you follow the whole process, once they actually come in, we have to make sure that we don't shortchange the people that we're seeing. We're giving them the same amount of attention that we're giving the people that we are seeing now. So you might even do a little bit of a study. How much time am I spending with each new patient? Well, if we add X amount more new patients, I'm going to have an additional X amount of time to accommodate these new patients. And if it results in the same level of case acceptance, I'm going to need X amount of time in my schedule as the doctor to be able to actually produce this treatment. And you start to get an idea of what it's going to take to actually see the benefit from increasing this initial input, whether it's hygiene, new patients, or whatever it might be. Now, in order to do that, you need organizational skills. This is where companies like us come in, where we do the MGE Power Program. I'll put a link to it in the description if you want to find out more about it. But this is where you want to make sure that you're properly organized in order to accommodate that increase, because making that increase isn't just a matter of doing one thing. It's a matter of doing a number of other things. But also there's a bit of a chicken and the egg concept here too. Do I go and hire a bunch of people before I create the phone calls to get more new patients? Do I go hire a bunch of hygienists so that I have availability in order to fill it? Well, that really is a question for you in the sense of how confident are you in creating the initial increase. If I knew, let's say I'm you, and I'm getting 40 new patients a month, and I knew that by a flick of a switch, I could start getting 80. I had complete 100% confidence. Maybe I'd done it before, okay? Well then, yeah, I'm gonna hire the team while I get everything in place to turn that switch on to get those 80 new patients and get them ready, because boom, the switch goes and we're set, all right? If I'm not super confident that I can create that increase, but it's something that I do want to do and I'm working towards, well, then maybe I'm going to work on that increase initially, see the bump, maybe you live with a little bit of inefficiency initially, while I fill the the ability to handle that increase in the practice, so that I can then make it more efficient and see the resultant increase that I was hoping for in the first place. Anyway, that's about all I have for you there, but I hope that helps. When you're thinking of doing any type of growth or an increase in your practice, always think with the whole process. Don't think with just one thing. It's very limiting. And to that end, we have a service, if you want to check it out, this is my shameless plug of the video, called the MGE New Patient Workshop. If you want to check it out, although I did just plug the Power Program a second ago. The MGE New Patient Workshop not only shows you how to get more new patients, but it shows you how to convert those patients and what to do with them when they get into practice. The average client sees a 42% increase in their new patients who does the workshop, so you should definitely check it out. I'll put a link to it in the description below. Anyway, folks, that's all I have for you this week. I hope it helped. And by the way, if you'd like to see more video content like this, don't forget to subscribe and turn notifications on so that you find out every time a new tip is dropped. If you'd like to find out more about MGE, check us out online at mgeonline.com or give us a call at 800-640-1140. I'll see you at the next tip.